Good morning. Glad to have you with us. We will be in Genesis 41 right after this. And we're glad that you're back with us. It's sunny. I didn't need to tell you that. I don't know why it is that I want to open up with weather every week, but glad that you're with us on this Monday morning plugged in. We'll be in Genesis 41, and a lot like last week, I'm just going to hit a couple of highlights in the text. I am going to read a section toward the last, but just going to invite of you to read the story in its entirety and its details. But I want to share a little insight to get to this chapter today. The 20th President of the United States, James Garfield. He was principal at Hiram College in Ohio at one time. And while he was there was a father who asked Garfield if the course of study could be simplified so that his son could be able to go through on a shorter route. And Garfield, without even missing a beat, said, certainly, we can make that happen. But then he said this, but it all depends on what you want to make of your son. When God wants to make an oak tree, he takes 100 years. When he wants to make a squash, it requires only 2 months. We've been following the story of Joseph, and it is evident that God was not only with Joseph, but that God had a special purpose for him. And all that Joseph went through helped to mature him. It didn't take 100 years like an oak tree, but it only took about 20 years. But God allowed for Joseph to experience some hard times so that his faith would become strong, and in so doing, God is about to reward Joseph for his endurance and determination. Last week, when we were together, we looked at the story in which there were two workers for Pharaoh, the cupbearer and the baker. For some reason, Pharaoh did not like them. They'd done something that upset him, so he put them in prison. And when he did, Joseph was in charge of them. Both of them had a dream, but neither one could interpret the dream, so they went to Joseph. Joseph interpreted the dream. Now, when he told the cupbearer his dream, he said, the time is coming when you will be restored back to your original position. The cupbearer liked that. Now, here's what Joseph said to him. When that happens, do not forget the good that I've done to you. Joseph also interpreted the dream of the baker, and, well, that one didn't turn out as nice as the cupbearer. 3 days later, at the king's birthday, the baker did not get his position restored to him. He was hanged. So this was not going good. But here's what happened. The cupbearer, in all of the transition, forgot Joseph. And so we kind of talked about that last week, and we left our story in that moment where Joseph then spends another 2 years in prison. In fact, when we read Genesis 41, verse 1, here's what it says. When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. Now you can read the rest of that. Think about that. 2 full years, 24 months. On our calendar, that would be 730 days that Joseph had to wait for God to reveal his plan. And again, That plan would come by interpreting a dream. When we look around verse 8, here's what happens. The chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings." Oh, all of a sudden he remembers. He says, Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. And so the cupbearer proceeds to tell Pharaoh who it was that interpreted his dream. Well, Pharaoh decides to call Joseph. And what he does is he tells Joseph his dream. Now, again, you'll read it, but here's the summary. Pharaoh has two dreams. The first dream, he dreams of seeing some cows along the Nile that are fat, very good looking, full of meat. He also sees some cows that are gaunt looking and sleek and not very healthy. But then he wakes up. He then has another dream, and in this dream, he finds 7 heads of grain that are, again, very good. But then he finds 7 heads that are not well. So what Pharaoh does is he asks for Joseph to interpret the dream, and he says, hey, they're one and the same. The 7 healthy cows or the 7 healthy grain pieces of wheat show that what's going to happen is there's going to be 7 years of really good crops, 7 years of good prosperity. There's going to be 7 years also of not so good. And so what happens is the Pharaoh says to Joseph, well, I want to make this right with you. So I want you to look at verse 25 and following. So Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh and are one and the same, and God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of the grain are 7 years. It is one and the same. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterward are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain, scorched by the east winds. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he's about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered because the famine that follows will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store them up in a grain barn. This food should be held for reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be in ruin. The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all of his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, can we find anyone like this man like this man that he's talking about, one in whom the Spirit of God is in? And Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all of this known to you, there's no one discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace. All of my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. Now catch this, verse 41 and following. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger, put it on Joseph's finger, and he dressed him in robes of fine linen, put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and people shouted before him, make way. Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Talk about a rags to riches story. It took 20 years, thereabouts, for this to happen. But all along the way, Joseph remained faithful to God. And because of that, God not only was faithful to him, God rewarded him. And so as we close this morning, here's my encouragement to you. Endure. Persevere. Tough times are going to come. Hard times are going to come your way. Do not give up on God. He always has a plan for you. And when you endure to the end, your reward will be great. Thank you again for joining us this week. We'll be back next week for Plugged In. Have a wonderful Monday and the rest of this week. See you next week.